Take a seat.
This is Lim Shaofen, Chairman of the Speak Mandarin Campaign, Honorable Ministers, this is Her Excellency, the Ambassador from the PRC to Singapore, friends and fellow citizens. English is my master language, and Chinese is my second, or rather my fourth or fifth language. So you will forgive me if I elaborate my ideas in English, and I will assume that most people will understand what I've said in English, and so my Chinese speech will be directed at the Chinese-speaking Singaporeans. 30 years ago, I launched the Speak Mandarin Campaign. Chinese students learned Mandarin in school. Unfortunately, they used to speak dialects amongst themselves, at home, and with their friends. A variety of dialects. So when I watched TV interviews on our Chinese TV channels in the 1960s and 70s, I found students and workers speaking Mandarin haltingly because they have not used it often. Mandarin has to be the common language of Chinese Singaporeans, regardless of their dialect groups. If we had left as a government the people to carry on with their language habits undirected, today Chinese Singaporeans will be speaking an adulterated mixture of Hokkien and Teochew, because that was the majority population that understood these two languages. That was the reason why I had to learn Hokkien and use Hokkien from 1961 till 1979, when I decided I was setting a bad example and stopped it. To effectively promote Mandarin, we had to do some drastic things. So we closed down all dialect programs on radio and TV from 1979, except for one news channel in all dialects at 8 p.m. for those of the older generation who did not understand Mandarin. But over time, the older generation learned to understand Mandarin without being able to speak it, and that's good enough. As I said, I was setting a bad example, making speeches in Hokkien in the 1960s and 70s, because it reached the largest number of Singaporean Chinese. From 1979, 30 years ago, I launched the Speak Mandarin Campaign and stopped speaking Hokkien and switched to Mandarin. And so today, Hokkien and Teochew will not be the predominant language, and adulterated Hokkien and Teochew is not the predominant language of Singapore's Chinese. The value of a language is its usefulness. Usefulness not just in Singapore, but in the wider world. If you speak Hokkien or Teochew or Cantonese or Hakka or Kehua or Hainanhua, you reach a few tens of millions in Fujian, Guangdong, Hainan, Xiantou, maybe if you speak Cantonese, you get by in Hong Kong. That's a Hong Kong problem. But with Mandarin, you can speak and be understood throughout China, because the Chinese have moved from hundreds of different pronunciations of the Chinese into Putonghua. They don't call it Guoyi because then you slight those dialects that did not were not chosen as the standard. So they said 普通话, the common language. As a result, it is now the main language of Chinese that the world recognizes. And overseas Chinese and all foreigners learn Mandarin, not Cantonese, Hokkien, or whatever. Of course, if you go to a restaurant where you have the old generation Cantonese waiters and chefs and you can speak Hui Guang, Hui Qiang Guangdonghua, then it's extra warmth. But you are losing important neurons with data which should not be there. And like the computer, when you delete it, it doesn't really go away. It's there at the back. And you got to go to the rubbish channel and say, destroy. And it's still disturbing your hard disk. The Chinese have set up 500 Confucius Institutes in many countries to teach Mandarin to millions of people around the world. You saw the video just now that Muslim Shaofen showed you. That's the time to learn Chinese. I learned it as an adult, and the roots are difficult to go deep. My children learned it at that age, and theirs is like a transistor radio. You switch on, it comes on. Mine is like an old valve radio. I switch on, I wait for the valves to warm up, then it flows. So when I go to Taiwan, I go to China, first day, awkward. Second day, not too bad. By the end of the week, 没有问题. Now, I understand how strong are the emotional feelings for one's mother tongue. That's the language. But in 1, 2, 3 generations, Mandarin can and will become our mother tongue. Now, let me put things in perspective. English is the key language for Singaporeans to make a living. If we had chosen Mandarin or Malay or Tamil, we wouldn't be here today, and UC would not have this building. That's a reality of the modern world. We connected ourselves to the developed world. All MNCs speak English. All banks speak English. The internet is in English, and English connects us to the world. It is the second language of all the non-English speaking peoples. So the Europeans used to learn each other's languages. Today they are learning English. And a Frenchman and a German meet and they speak in English. Because your brain cannot carry all this different sounds, different accents, different grammar rules, and so on. And the Chinese themselves are learning English with tremendous efforts and with great enthusiasm. Supposing we had made Mandarin our first language, then I tell you, apart from domestic troubles with our Malays and our Tamils and our non-Chinese, what is the use of Singaporeans to China? They don't need another 3 million Chinese-speaking people. They got 1,300 million, 23 million in Taiwan, 7 million in Xianggang, 3 million more speaking Chinese. What value is it to them? But because we have English, because we have access to the English-speaking world and the knowledge that goes with it, and the commercial and economic context that we have developed, and the links that we have over the years evolved with the world in general, not just the English-speaking world, but the world that now uses English as a common language, that's why we are useful. Now, if Lim Shaofen, this is another one of our problems. See? My script here says Lim Shaohong. Her Mandarin pronunciation is Lin Shaofen. You're just confusing yourself. So every time I have a new member of the staff, he has a name. He has got 3 names. One, he calls himself George, David, whatever because it's easy for people to remember him. Then he's got his dialect name, and he's got his Mandarin name. I have to waste megabytes here remembering 3 different names for one person. If she did not speak English and she had no connections with the English-speaking world, she is of no value to China. It was because she also spoke English well and writes English with precision and has been able to compete in both languages in the advertising sector and had connected with the Western advertising agencies. So she learned how to project ideas. So you saw the way she launched into this Speak Mandarin campaign, her opening, her closing, the cadence, the videos. If she were Chinese speaking and we were Chinese speaking, she would never have learned that, because she was cooperating and working with all the best publicity PR firms in the world, so she could make a valuable contribution to China's well-known director, Zhang Yimou. She was part of the team that polished up that dramatic opening ceremony of the Beijing Olympics in August last year. No English. They don't need another Lin Shaofen. But because she had English, because they did not have English, because they did not have the exposure to the Western world that she had acquired, and she was able to translate her Western exposure into Chinese terms. And she was able to coin slogans for Bank of China, slogans for many companies. Crisp Chinese words, but using the concepts, the ideas that were the words that would give an impact in the smallest number of words. Now, to keep a language alive, you have to speak it frequently. If you use more than one language, if you use one language frequently, you are using other languages less frequently. So the more languages you learn, the greater the difficulties of retaining them at a high level of fluency. I have had to learn, and I've had to use 6 languages. Each one of them, at the time I used them, I became fluent in it. English, Malay, Latin, Japanese during the occupation, Mandarin and Hokkien. But because I work in English, English is my master language. In 1960s, 1970s, I can speak Hokkien a Hmong way, like an Hmong person, because I had to do it. But today, my Hokkien has gone rusty, and my Mandarin has improved. When I was speaking Hokkien, my Mandarin went down. If I have to make a speech in Hokkien now, I have to spend a few hours writing it out and thinking, yes, how do I pronounce this word? I was a Japanese English translator for business in 1944-45. I had to learn it. Today it's gone. Yes, I can read the katakana, hiragana, I can read the kanji, patches here and there. I can spend 6 months and bring it back. But something else will be pushed out. So please remember, nobody's brain is 1,000 gigabytes. At the most is 5 gigabytes. And the more you waste gigabytes with all these multiple names and grammatical rules and accents, the less you have of other things. And when you don't use a language, it goes rusty. And in linguistics, you call it language loss. 流失，语言流失。
Take a seat.